Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dev Diaries episode 8. I know it's been a moment since the last episode, but there's a good reason for that because I've been working really hard on something. So, what is it? It's a Nomad type map, as you can see by the gameplay in the background here. So, obviously, with it taking a while, this video is also going to be a while too as I go over what happened and why and how I developed it. So, I knew that I wanted to make a Nomad map eventually, but I refused to make it earlier on because I wasn't sure if I was skilled enough to do it yet. I honestly could have just taken AWA Unknown and then put the Nomad game mode on it and called it a day, but that was not only lazy, but I also wanted to break the norm for Nomad. Like, I wanted to do something really special that a lot of people would enjoy. So I thought to myself, how can I make Nomad special? Well, one of the main appeals of Nomad is being able to find where you want to set up your first base as opposed to it being forced upon you by the automatic placement system. So I thought to myself, what if there's a way I could make each place look visually unique so you would feel inclined to settle at a certain place? So then the idea stumbled upon me, why not make a map with several different biomes on it? Well, I actually know why. It's because that sounds completely difficult and I have no idea how to do it. The closest thing I had was Katsu Monsoon, and even then, that's not actually a split biome feature, it's just two biomes shoved together and I made them sharply contrast. And even then, that took a while, so I took a while to make something that's not even really a split biome feature. And now I'm expecting myself to do something that actually is like that, but on a much larger scale. This is glossing over the fact that I don't even know how to make a Nomad type map. In the past, I've attempted to copy the code for Nomad before, but I couldn't get it to work. So today, I was finally going to confront those things, and as you can see by the large time gap between the last dev diary and the current one, it definitely took a moment figuring out, but I think I did it. So first off, getting the ceasefire of Nomad and the villager placement to work, I just mostly copied the code of the existing Nomad, since the best way to ensure that it has parity with the vanilla game was to use the vanilla game's functions. After all, my map packs are vanilla plus. But despite copying the code, I couldn't get the ceasefire to work for some reason. I made sure that any trigger that looked like it was related to the ceasefire was copied over, but for some reason it just wasn't executing. So I had to go through the painful journey of copying the Nomad code and dissecting it one line at a time. By removing one line at a time, I can see exactly when the ceasefire stops to work, and then when it stops working, I can assume that the line I had removed was related to the ceasefire. And I eventually found it after a day of removing code. For some reason, the ceasefire is connected to this code that determines Nomad's lighting. And even then, I don't think that code actually works because nothing about Nomad's lighting changes, as the code would imply, because Nomad uses one lighting ever. And injecting that lighting code to my map didn't change my lighting whatsoever. But whatever, I figured it out, I took it, and now it works, so I carried on. And now I had exhausted a whole day just to be able to copy over one basic function. Now it's not looking too good for me, is it? I was struggling this hard just to port over something that already exists, and now I want to make something that sounds completely wild and difficult. But whatever, it was this or go back to working on the boring stuff of updating my maps, so I carried on. So my first concept of the map was to have this giant wasteland, kind of like Outlaw Waste, and there would be oases of different biomes found between the wasteland. But the minimap wasn't looking too good because of that, so I decided to make it an island map where you have different islands with different biomes. Of course, I make land maps only. I'm a land map specialist in case I haven't said it already 50 times throughout the series or throughout other posts. So I had to make the water shallow so that you could easily traverse between the islands. It was really important that the water was shallow and crossable by foot because if your villagers spawn on an island with no town center, then you guys could just leave. Versus if you had not so shallow or deep water, then you would just be stuck on that island with no town center and then you would just lose from the beginning, and that's not very fun. Because for some reason this game decided that you can't build transport ships until age 2. So it definitely benefits the players from a game design standpoint if it's all land. But hey, I at least could make a map with an island aesthetic to it. And another liberating thing about making a Nomad map is that I don't have to care as much about balance as I do normal maps. See, in normal maps, I often dock fun features to make sure that things are symmetrical and fair between players, which also limits the amount of visual design you can give to a map because you need it to be symmetrical at all times. But with a Nomad map, you don't really need to do that since the player chooses where they want to start, so I can just go crazy and have an unsymmetrical design for once. Another benefit of not just simply porting over AWA Unknown. But yeah, I had these amazing ideas for islands, but how am I going to make them? So my first idea was to get my pond code from other maps where there's ponds that spawn all over the place. So while other maps start with nothing but land, this map started with nothing but shallow water, so I was going to reverse the pond code to make land instead of ponds. And yeah, surprisingly it worked very well, and that's what you're looking at on screen right now. A bunch of ponds reverse engineered to be land masses instead on a water map. But that's when my first issue came up. See, with ponds, I want them to be sporadic and spread apart because I don't want the whole map covered in ponds, and which inhibits the player from moving. But now it's the opposite. I'm trying to put land masses everywhere next to each other so that you have plenty of area to fight and play on. So it took me another day of just adjusting settings alone to get the land masses to look half decent. Like if I made the land masses too big without making any constrictions, then the land masses would fuse together and become these abominations. That or if I even prevented them from fusing, then they would look completely ugly in shape. But eventually I sorted all these problems out. One change I did though was I had a set center island spawn. Having something spawn in a dead center with a fixed shape actually helped control the other shapes of the islands really well, and left a lot less dead space, since they would form around it instead of spawning sporadically. And while I was messing with that, I started testing the waters for randomizing things, starting with, well, randomizing the water, no pun intended. And using this new method that I should have honestly thought of sooner, it helped me randomize the water really efficiently. Remember, I have no formal coding experience, I do this stuff for fun, so if you're cringing right now after I explain it, please forgive me. But before I would alter every single water type to get ready for which water type the map picked. But now I've made it in a way that whatever water type the map picks will be altered accordingly, if that makes sense. So for example, before I just had to prepare every water type to be ready, but now let's say if it picks marsh shallows, the map itself will ready marsh shallows. I didn't know this was possible, but how I did this was by turning the water into a variable. I didn't know you could do that. If I make AWA unknown today with the knowledge I have now, I would make it so much more efficient and there would be so much more freedom of creativity and randomization to it. But whatever, AWA unknown's already made, and the fact that it's made with nothing but if statements is kind of charming to me. It's like the amateur's dream, especially since I was much bigger of an amateur then compared to now. But back to the main subject, this has actually helped me randomize each biome. It wouldn't actually help me with the islands choosing the biome, but it would help me with the islands randomizing what kind of biome. Here, let me give you an example to better explain this. So the island chooses if it wants to be grass, dirt, desert, snow, whatever. This code didn't help me with that, but it did help me with if the island is snow, what kind of snow will it be, or if it's marsh, what kind of marsh it's going to look like. So yeah, pay attention that when you play that even amongst the mini biomes, they will vary a little bit. So you might have a normal marsh with normal grass, or a really wet marsh, or you might have a green snowy area or a yellow snowy area. And that was because of this code that I discovered when making the randomization of the water. But making the islands randomize what biome it chose in the first place and not the many biome variants was actually something new I also did that I don't think I have done on any other map. Basically, I was managed to only use one variable, and each time an island would generate, it would reset itself and roll a new dice instead of using the same die. And with a new dice each time, it would change what biome it picked and then profit. That's how I got each island to pick a different biome. Although it is completely possible with this method that it rolls the same biome several times, that you're really unlucky. So sorry if you play and there's like 5 grass biomes next to each other. That was completely bad luck on your part. But with 8 biome choices and many islands to spawn, that's highly unlikely. The 8 biome choices you can get per island on this map will be marsh, grass, tundra, snow, savanna, desert, alternative grass, which is like a dirt looking kind of area, and the underworld island, because you know I love putting the underworld into maps. There were a lot of other choices put up for debate, such as I thought about making a city one, but I eventually settled on these ones. For now at least, if the Aztecs add anything like a blue grass or even a red grass, or maybe a really distinct looking jungle biome, I might add as island type. But for the most part, one of the main limiting factors is Age of Mythology actually has a 48 terrain biome limit of sorts, so you can't use more than 48 terrains in your map. That's why you may notice each island is just one terrain repeating for that. I tried to pick terrains that didn't look too bad when they repeated. And I obviously have the capability to make it a mesh like other maps, but I didn't want to do that, or else I'd approach the 48 limit. And you're probably thinking to yourself, if I only have 8 biomes, how would I approach the 48 limit? Okay, let's say we have 8 textures for each biome. That's already 8. And then each building, like settlement that builds upon each biome, will make a road texture around it if you guys notice. There's actually like 2 road textures at each settlement, one underneath the settlement itself directly under that's concentrated, and then one at the edge that's more sparse with the roading. So just like that, 3 times 8 is 24. But don't forget that each forest has a unique forest terrain underneath it. So now we're at 8 times 4, which is 32, and you can see we're quickly approaching 48. But let's not forget that each water type has a shore, a floor, and a beach. So now we're at 35 out of 48, and if you ask me, I don't want to attempt it any closer, especially if I want more biomes in the future at any point. So that's why I gotta keep the biomes pretty tame in terms of their detail for this map. But I hope the amount of biomes and the possible randomization makes up for it. I know I made the desert vary that most of the time you'll get the normal Egypt desert, but rarely you'll get the rare Chinese desert. The snowy grass area may occasionally have a yellow snowy grass, and the grass islands vary between 3 grass types. There are other details like the underworld or the marsh being different, but they may be hard to notice, so just keep an eye out. But that wasn't enough. Just like AWA Unknown, one of the most important things to making a thing look different each time is the forest. So I made sure to randomize the forest for most biomes. Like for the grass biome, there's 4 variety packs of trees you can have, all green to keep it boring, but then the alternative grass / dirt biome has a bunch of unique trees like peach blossoms or pear trees with their colors that stand out from the grass. Additionally, the snow version can have 2 forest types, and so can the marsh. As we know, deserts in this game don't have many tree types, so it's just a matter of whether it has palm trees or savanna trees or a mix of both. Oh yeah, and the tundra swaps between an autumn mix and a more of a brown / golden mix. But yeah, hopefully that adds some spice to your gameplay each time you play, you know? On top of the fact that you guys already have 8 biomes to settle on. I'm showing you guys the profits here, but judging by the fact that it's been over 10 days since last dev diary, this has taken me a lot of work. Like randomizing islands was 1 day, getting the islands to even work in the first place was 2 days, getting the forest to randomize was another day, yada yada so forth. Don't even get me started on how difficult it was to put biome-specific animals and details on each island. On each island, you'll find biome-specific fauna or flora. Some biomes may share, some may not. I made sure to have very careful details to what shares what and what doesn't share what. But you can see obviously in like the marsh biome on screen, and it might have hippos, and hippos do not spawn anywhere else except for maybe the underworld, since I really don't know what lives in the underworld. Or you might only find elephants in deserts or savannas. Going beyond that, I even put in details like bushes only spawn in the grassy areas, and then you'll find dead bushes exclusive to the snow, the desert, and the underworld biome. I won't spoil it anymore, just try to see what details only spawn on what islands. But man, was that a pain in the butt to program. What I have to do for said detail is tell it to avoid all the other possible islands. So let's say there's a detail that only spawns on the 2 islands. So the elephant, for example, only spawns on desert and savanna islands. I had to write one line of code for every island I don't want it in. And I had to do that for zebras, giraffes, rhinoceros, you name it. I had to do that for each detail, each biome, and there's so many details on this map, it's not even funny, because I wanted to make sure all the biomes had flourishing life and flora that was appropriate to them to keep them from looking too bland since they only have one terrain type. And you'll even notice other details like cows only spawn on temperate biomes while goats spawn in the more hot or cold biomes, or berries only spawn on grassy biomes and refuse to spawn on places like the underworld or the desert, and on those biomes they will have chickens in their place instead of berries to keep it somewhat fair. But thank goodness I could throw balance out the window for this Nomad map. I didn't make it completely unfair most of the time, but for the most part there might be some disparities where things are not fair. You just have to deal with it in the nature of this map, and I think it just looks good. You know, it's possible that your opponent might have a single gold mine more than you, but for the most part, I'm not actively trying to make this map unfair, I'm just not treading so lightly to make it completely fair. And while I extensively test most of my maps, I kind of get bored after like the 3rd test. On this one, I had so much fun with each test, I was just so excited to play it, and I hope many of you have that same excitement when you play it. Hopefully it will do somewhat as decent as well as AWOT Unknown, but even if only 1 or 2 people play it, I'll be happy that someone else enjoyed it at the very least. The original cut for this video was like 25 minutes long because I kept whining about all the hard work I had to put into it, but honestly I'll just cut that out and let you guys enjoy it. But you can see that I had worked on it so long that I almost forgot to do this week's challenge. I know you can go back and do them now because they enabled all previous weeks, but I usually like to do them the week of, and since I had been working this map so long, I almost forgot to do this week's challenge, and you can see in the gameplay footage right now that I'm working on it. But even the gameplay footage is an early alpha. I've since then added a lot of details. Like now each forest type has unique things that spawn within the forest itself instead of just being trees. Like for example, in certain forest types, when you dig it, there'll be some flowers left over. I'm thinking about going back to my older maps and adding this detail too. Some of them already have it. I actually started off using this detail in most maps, but then somewhere along the way I just dropped it. So I'm considering going back and adding it to old ones. But yeah, expect dev diaries to be decently dry after this, since I'm mostly just working on a relic change that will apply to all my maps, but applying it will take a bit, and after that it's mostly just cleaning up code and making balance changes such as nerfing herdables on some map. Don't worry, Cattlelands will have its ridiculous amount of cows still. Besides that, I can outlaw waste a little bit of visual overall, nothing too significant, and I'm planning on giving White Point a decent rework, make it more unique than just the snow map, you know? Since when I made it I was just inexperienced and I just wanted to make a snow map for the heck of it, but now I want all my maps to have something decently unique to them. Actually, this reminds me of something, and I want to just add it here since I don't know where else to add it, but in Age of Mythology random maps, you can add 3 types of spawning. Obviously, you can spawn everyone in a circle or a square, since those are the 2 types that most maps use. But there's a 3rd option called the ellipse. Basically, put 2 parentheses together, and that's what an ellipse looks like. And I want to use it for this map. For some reason, it just wouldn't take. Like, it would cause this rare bug where no town centers would spawn, and I say rare, honestly, but it wasn't that rare. It was like happening 20% of times. I ran like 1,000 simulations, and it happened 185 times or something like that. So yeah, this map had been the one that I want to use ellipses on, since there was really no other map that you could use that on, since making an ellipse shape would just be terrible for gameplay design. But on this map, since you could move and choose where you start, making an ellipse shape wasn't so bad, I thought to myself, but then it just wouldn't work in my code and I just gave up. Oh, and for some reason, as retribution for losing the ellipses, I messed around the middle island map, so sometimes it'll be a square. Most of the time it's gonna be a circle, but sometimes, check it out, it might be a square, like a nice little square. And about like half the time it'll be a cliff instead of a normal island. I want to add cliffs to all islands, but that ended up really buggy, making the map a little bit too choky in testing as well. And also smaller maps that were cliffs, they would just be nothing but a cliff and it'd just be kind of weird looking, and sometimes resources would get stuck on islands that had no entrances. So honestly, a disaster. I wouldn't worry about adding cliffs besides the center one, since the center one is a set large size that everything else builds itself around to. Having it as a cliff is not too bad. But yeah, all this to say that there were islands that were planned to be randomly generating as cliffs instead of normal islands, but both gameplay and design wise it was just a no-go. But yeah, I really glossed over it compared to the original video because I felt like I was whining too much, but at the same time I might have also left out a bunch of things I did randomize for this map, so I just want to leave the magic up to you. Instead of spoiling it, why don't you go on this map and look for yourself what randomizes and what's exclusive to each island, or what islands share actually, since I don't think there's actually any feature that's exclusive to each island except the terrain in the forest. But yeah, things are looking good. I am still on pace to finish by February 10th, but there is a possibility now that I will not finish on time. So be ready to wait a week to get this content. But besides that, thank you for watching today. I hope I didn't sound too mopey still despite this retake, and thank you for watching.
Τέκτον. Λέγε τέκτον. Θηρευτής.